Rich cowboy pretends to sleep to test shy maid, and freezes seeing what she does. The wind moved slowly over the wide plains of Hilford Ranch, stirring nothing but dust and dry grass. Morning had not fully broken yet. A soft grey hung over the land like a wool blanket left out in winter. The house stood at the edge of the land, 2 floors, old wood, and too many empty rooms for one man to fill. Inside, everything was quiet except the soft creak of floorboards and the low hum of a stove that never truly warmed the space. William Crowe, the man who owned it all, lay still in the old leather couch by the window. Boots off, eyes closed, one hand resting over his chest like he'd drifted off from exhaustion. But he wasn't asleep. He had returned from Denver the night before. Longer trip than expected. When he entered his home, everything had been spotless. Floor shining, logs stacked tight, dinner waiting in the warmer. No one had known he was coming, yet someone had made the place feel lived in, cared for, too carefully. That someone was her. She'd been working at the ranch for just under 4 months. They said her name was Emma. Small frame, quiet voice, eyes that never held his gaze for longer than a second. She moved like a shadow through the halls, always ahead of the mess. Never speaking unless spoken to, never asking for anything. Just doing the work and disappearing like dust behind the wind. William didn't like mysteries, not on his land, and especially not ones that walked softly and smiled like they had something to hide. So he lay still that morning, pretending to sleep, listening for the smallest sound. And then he heard it. The door opened with a soft creak. Slow footsteps. Gentle. Careful. They came closer, stopping just at the edge of the couch. He didn't move. Not even a twitch. Then something unexpected happened. A soft fabric was placed on him. A blanket, folded, warm. She tucked it gently around his shoulders, not like a worker, but like someone afraid he might be cold. He heard her exhale. Not a sigh, something closer to pain, then a pause, longer this time. He felt the slightest brush near his temple, not a kiss, not a touch, just breath. Then she whispered, "I hope they never break you too." And just like that, she disappeared back into the silence. William's eyes opened, wide and still. Something inside him shifted. He did not know who she was, but he knew that pain, and now he needed to find out why she carried it so quietly. The day moved on, but that moment clung to William like a shadow that would not leave. He rode the fence line, checked the southern water trough, and even dropped by the neighbor's spread for a brief exchange about broken gates, but his thoughts kept circling back to what he'd heard. "I hope they never break you too." She had meant every word. That was no slip of tongue or sleep-talking. It was a wound, talking to another wound. That night, he returned home late, deliberately. He wanted to see what she did when she thought no one watched. But the house was dark, except for the dim lantern she left burning near the staircase. His plate was on the table again, warm food wrapped in a cotton cloth, a folded note in the corner, just one word. "Sir." Emma wasn't in sight. The third morning he stepped into the kitchen earlier than usual. She flinched when she saw him, not visibly, but something in her neck tensed, like a deer hearing a twig snap behind it. She stood straighter, hands moving quickly to the bread dough. "You been sleeping all right?" he asked, tone casual. She nodded. "Yes, sir." Her voice was so quiet, it barely reached the air between them. "You always leave that blanket?" he added, watching her hands. She paused, just for a breath, then nodded again. "Sometimes the house gets cold." He studied her. No eye contact, no extra words, just that same shy frame and silent strength. But now, he saw it clearer. The way she stood with her back to the wall, never facing a door head-on, the way her eyes dropped when spoken to, as if bracing for something worse than words. These were not just habits. They were learned survival. He'd seen it before. A younger version of himself standing on a porch with bruises hidden under sleeves, waiting for a father's boots to thunder through the door, waiting for a voice to snap like a whip. And he remembered the way silence became armor, how softness became risk. He had run from it, rode cattle in snow, slept under open skies, built this ranch with his hands just to forget how small he once felt. But here it was again, in her, in this quiet girl who cleaned his house like she was apologizing for existing. That night he walked into the barn, sat on a wooden crate, and stared at the floor for what felt like hours. The wind pushed dust through the open slats. Somewhere in the darkness, a horse whinnied. He had two choices. Let her keep working, say nothing, pay her well, and let the silence stand between them like a locked door. Or ask. Risk breaking that fragile quiet. Risk opening the same box he'd nailed shut years ago. The next morning, he found her in the yard, hanging laundry with red fingers stiff from cold. He walked up slowly, said nothing at first. Then he placed a new pair of leather gloves beside her basket. She looked at them, then at him. He met her eyes. "I want you to stay here, safe, not just work," he said, voice steady. "If anyone's looking for you, I need to know." She didn't reply. But she didn't run either. That 2 days passed, then 3. Emma wore the gloves, cooked the meals, kept the silence. But something had changed. Not in her voice, still soft and brief. Not in her posture, still careful. But in the way she paused sometimes, just a moment longer, as if considering whether to speak. William didn't push. He waited. Then, late one afternoon, a stranger rode into the ranch. Dust clung to the bar. Man's coat. His hat sat low, hiding sharp eyes that flicked too quickly between buildings. William met him halfway, one hand near the buckle of his belt, the other loose by his side. "Help you with something?" William asked. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just looking for someone working under you. Girl, small thing, goes by Emma, I think. Or maybe she gave a different name. Real quiet type. Should have been gone by now." William's chest tightened. He didn't show it. "Plenty work here," he replied calmly. "But I don't give out names to strangers." The man nodded slowly. "See, she took something. Not money. Just something mine. And I need it back. You understand?" William didn't flinch. "No, I don't." The man tipped his hat and smiled again. "She's marked. Not legally, but by promise. She don't get to just leave." He turned his horse and rode off without another word. That night, Emma didn't ask why William came home with mud on his boots and a shotgun already in hand, but she paused when she saw him cleaning it in the kitchen, lantern low. "Do you know a man with a scar across his cheek?" he asked without looking up. Her breath hitched, just slightly. "I didn't take anything," she whispered. William said nothing. He waited. She stepped back as if bracing for anger. "He says I belong to him, that I was paid for. I cooked in his cousin's house. He drank, watched too closely. One night he touched my hair. I ran the next morning." She looked down at her hands. "I thought the wind would carry me far enough." William wiped the barrel clean, quietly. "You've been here 4 months, he said, "and not once did you flinch at the sound of a man's voice. That takes grit." Her eyes lifted. For the first time, she looked at him fully. "What did he mean by marked?" he asked. Emma's lips tightened. "He gave a man coin for me, told everyone I was his cousin's debt, that I owed him now. A lie wrapped in a business deal, no law paper, no justice, just men trading pain like cattle." William stood, his height shadowing the room. "He'll come back," she said. Always do. William walked to the window, stared out into the night. Let him, he muttered. He knew what was coming. The man wasn't alone. Men like that never traveled without muscle, without guns, without the kind of sickness that moved in packs. He bolted the front door and blew out the lantern. Outside, the wind had shifted. War was coming. Was enough for now. The days that followed passed like held breath. The ranch was quiet, but not still. Every morning William checked the perimeter. Every night he moved tools closer to the barn door. Quiet preparations. Emma never asked what he was doing. She just swept the floors and boiled stew, her eyes always scanning windows like something might press against the glass. But between the fear, something else was building. One afternoon, William stood behind the barn with an old Winchester in hand. He fired once. The tin can bounced from the fence post. He heard footsteps behind him and turned. Emma stood there, hands tucked into her coat sleeves. "You ever fired a gun?" he asked, voice low. She hesitated, then shook her head. He held the rifle out. She didn't move. "I'm not asking you to fight," he said, "just to aim. It helps. Makes you feel less small." Emma stepped forward, slow, like walking into cold water. He placed the rifle gently in her hands, guiding her fingers around the wood. "Pull it tight into your shoulder. Lean forward a bit. Breath in. Don't hold it. Just steady." She lined up the shot. Missed. But he saw the twitch of a smile in her lips. Not pride. Just surprise. She didn't expect herself to belong in this kind of moment. They stayed there a while, taking turns, laughing without laughter, speaking through motion. When she finally hit the can, William clapped once, and her shoulders dropped in a breath she'd been holding for years. That night, she cooked rabbit stew with rosemary and wild onions. He peeled the potatoes at the table. They didn't speak much, but something passed between them. Safe silence. After the meal, William sat near the hearth, sleeves rolled to his elbows. She came in quietly, wiping her hands on a cloth. He saw her glance at the scar on his forearm, a long, pale line. "Barbed wire?" she asked softly. He nodded. "And rage." She tilted her head. "I was 17. Took a swing at my father after he raised a hand to my mother. He threw me clean across the porch. I landed hard. Got up slow. Next day I left. Never went back." Emma's hands stilled. He looked up. "You?" Her voice was almost a whisper. "I don't remember the first time I was hit. Just that it always came after kindness. A soft voice. A gift. I started fearing good things more than bad." They sat in silence. The fire crackled. A soft wind whistled through the chimney. Then she reached over, took his hand for a moment. Just held it. Not for safety, but in recognition. That night, William didn't bolt the door alone. She helped him carry the timber bar across, shoulder to shoulder. Outside, the moon rose. Inside, something gentler settled in the space between them. They did not speak of love. Not yet. But in the way he handed her the rifle, in the way she tucked the blanket over his chair, in the quiet glances held just a second too long, they spoke of trust. And that was harder to earn than love. The wind was wrong that morning. It blew heavy from the north, carrying a smell of dust and sweat. William stood by the corral gate, eyes on the hills, where a thin line of riders approached under the rising sun. 3 of them, men who sat their horses like they owned pain. Emma stepped outside, carrying a basin of washwater. She saw them. The basin slipped from her hands, water soaking into the dirt like blood. William turned. "Go inside." She didn't argue. He grabbed the rifle leaning near the post at bow and walked out to meet the dust. The men stopped just short of the fence. The one with the scar across his cheek dismounted first. He tipped his hat like this was a social call. "Morning," he said. William didn't answer. "We've come for the girl," the scarred man said. "She's not yours. She belongs to my cousin. You're harboring stolen property." "She ain't property," William replied. The man chuckled. "You a preacher now, cowboy." William stepped closer, boots grinding the dirt. "You come on my land, talking like that again, and I'll make sure you leave a foot shorter." One of the other men reached for his coat. William raised the rifle. The standoff dropped into silence. A hawk cried overhead. Somewhere behind him, he knew Emma was watching from the window. Then the scarred man spoke again, but this time to someone else. "Come on out, Jules." Another horse moved from behind the tree line, a boy, no older than 16, brown hair, scared eyes. He slid off the saddle, hands shaking. Emma stepped out from the porch. "Jules?" The boy looked up. "Emma, I didn't know they were coming." William glanced back at her. She whispered, "He's my brother." The scarred man smiled. "See? Family reunion. Ain't that sweet?" Jules stepped forward. "They said if I helped them find you, they'd let me go." Emma's knees buckled. She gripped the post for balance. William's jaw clenched. "You bring a child to do your dirty work?" Scarface shrugged. "Cheaper than a bloodhound." William lowered the rifle just an inch, enough to make the second man think he had a shot. The man reached for his holster. But William was faster. The first bullet hit the dirt near the man's boots, a warning. The second would not be. "Get off my land," William growled. Scarface raised both hands, smirking. All right, we're going." But then, he did something William didn't expect. He grabbed Jules by the collar and yanked him back onto the horse. Emma screamed. "You want her?" the man called out. "Then you lose the boy. Fair trade." William didn't think. He moved. He fired once. Clean shot. The man's shoulder cracked back, and Jules fell free. The horse bolted. The two remaining men scrambled to retreat. William ran to the boy, pulling him up, dragging him toward the porch. Emma met them halfway, threw her arms around her brother and sobbed so hard her knees gave out. William stood above them, gun still raised, breath heavy. He didn't look like a rich man then. He looked like a man who had nothing left to lose, and had just chosen love anyway. The wind died down by dusk. The dust settled along the fence line like ash after a fire. No one spoke for a long time. William sat on the porch, shirt streaked with blood that wasn't his. Jules lay on the old sofa inside, breathing steady, shoulder bruised but safe. Emma knelt beside him with a wet cloth, her movements quiet, eyes fixed. Outside, the world had gone still. No one came back for the boy, no posse, no threats, just silence. Scarface had ridden off holding his arm. Whether he'd live or die from it, no one knew. William hoped he lived. Let a man carry shame longer than wounds. That night, they didn't eat. No one had the stomach for it. William watched the stars come out. One by one, they blinked across the sky like distant lanterns held by people who had already left this world. Inside, Emma whispered something to her brother, then rose and stepped out onto the porch. Her dress was stained at the knees. She didn't wipe her hands, just stood beside William and looked out into the dark. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Her voice was low, carried on the breeze. "He used to sing to me, before our mother died." William nodded, eyes still on the horizon. After she passed, he changed, got quiet, then angry, then gone. When he came back, he wasn't mine anymore. Just theirs. He didn't turn to her, but she felt the warmth of his voice when he finally spoke. "That wasn't your fault." She nodded slowly, but the pain in her chest didn't ease. Not yet. They stood in silence, a long, aching silence that stretched through the trees and under the soil. Then William spoke again. "You both stay here. This land's yours, now as much as mine. No debts, no promises, just peace." She looked at him, not with tears, but with something stronger, something like belief. Before dawn, William saddled his horse. He rode alone to the nearest town, 15 miles over frost-bitten trail. He returned with a doctor for Jules and papers for Emma. Employment papers, safety papers, signed and sealed. He wasn't a lawman, but he knew the law of the land. What couldn't be erased could be overwritten. And what men tried to own with cruelty, he'd defend with something quieter, more lasting. That night, after Jules was bandaged and asleep, Emma sat by the fire with William again. He poured her tea. She sipped it in silence. Then she did something he didn't expect. She reached out and placed her hand over his, palm to palm. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. It was not a declaration. Not love. Not yet. It was a thank you. And a promise. The storm had passed, but they both knew something had been lost out there in the dust. What remained was not joy, but the beginning of peace. Spring came late that year. Snow clung longer to the high ridge, and the trees hesitated before blooming. But at Hilford Ranch, life began to unfold. Jules found work among the stables. He was still quiet, but his shoulders no longer curled inward. He smiled more now, especially when Emma teased him while cooking. The boy still flinched at loud noises, but he didn't run from them anymore. Emma grew into herself slowly, like a flower that didn't trust the sun. She spoke more, laughed sometimes. She took to mending clothes, planting herbs, even reading by the fire. William noticed the way she moved with less fear, the way her eyes didn't dart around corners anymore. She didn't ask for much, but she began to claim space, her space. William too changed. He no longer ate alone. His mornings were no longer filled with silence, but with the sound of footsteps on wood, the soft clink of plates, the laughter of two people who had once only known pain. Some nights, William would walk the fence line alone and stop by the small stone they had set in the northern field. Just a smooth rock, unmarked, pressed into the earth where the wind first changed. Emma placed it there without ceremony. She never said the man's name. She only whispered, "Let it end here." William honored that. He still kept the rifle near the door, but not out of fear, just memory. One evening, months later, they all sat around the dinner table. Emma had made apple pie for the first time. Jules joked that it was too sweet. She threw a rag at him. William smiled, leaned back in his chair, and watched the moment settle like dust in sunlight. Later, when the fire had died down and the house grew quiet again, William stood by the window and looked out over the land, the barn, the hills, the sky heavy with stars. Emma joined him. No words. They just stood there, shoulder to shoulder, looking out. He reached into his coat and pulled something small from his pocket, a folded slip of paper. He handed it to her. She opened it slowly. It was the deed to the ranch, her name written under his. Not as property, as legacy. She looked up at him, eyes wide with something that wasn't shock, but something older, deeper, like someone who had waited a long time to be told, "You belong." He didn't say anything. She nodded, just once. The wind moved through the house. Time passed. The world outside still held its cruelties, its scars. But in that quiet home, there was warmth, safety, and the rarest kind of freedom, the kind you don't have to run toward, because it meets you where you are. And somewhere in the silence between two damaged souls, something gentle had taken root, something that would never need words to be known. Sometimes, the loudest kind of love is the one that chooses to stay,